Well, I think the environment, like you said, is like very important, even if it's not to learn. It's like if you want to train a certain athlete, you need to go live in their world for a little bit
Yeah.
because you're not going to be able, you may have the right tools, but how are you going to communicate? So when I started with CF, I had no idea. So I was like, okay, what's the best thing I did? I contacted a doctor at Stanford University at the CF clinic and says, do you care if I just do any observations? I just want to understand the system from the medical side, from the
Yeah.
personal side. And it allowed me to integrate easy strength in a way that works for people with CF because I couldn't just be like, okay, I'm going to take easy strength and we're going to do exactly how it is because it wouldn't work that way because it's just there's just too many elements that you can't plan for. And so I think getting there and being around the environment is a very powerful thing. You can be the smartest person in the world, but if you've never been in that element, then how are you going to relay that in a way that's going to keep people consistent but see those linear positive gains?
Gentle listener, that's the $1 million thing for the day. So, it's the cliche. You got to walk a mile in somebody else's shoes and all that stuff, but it's absolutely true. When I we had used to have people visit my old facility when I was coaching in a high school, and they would say, I'm going to take and do everything at my place. And I go, you can't.
Yeah.
Because they were an after school program and I was a class. My class was an hour and a half. And a bell would ring. And there, well, actually, okay, class, you got to go shower, go. Well, after school is different.
Right.
You don't take attendance because it's voluntary. There was so many things that wouldn't work in an after school setting. It's still great. You can still
Right.
do it. And it's weird because the it you got to be careful just taking 5 sets of 2 and saying, okay, 5 sets of 2, 5 exercises, throw it in the thing. It's not working because you didn't walk a mile. Your clients, your athletes, your whoever have different things going on, and you constantly have to. I think great coaching is about fundamentals. Embrace the obvious, that stuff. True. And then it's adapting to the specific place and purpose.
Yeah, it's like they talk about get a certification, but it's not just get a certification. You need to be there and encompass it. And it's I think the context is lost sometimes when people learn like in the exercise science world. And these are barriers at the same time. When I was in college, I'm like, all right, 8 to 12 for hypertrophy, this and that, and then you do X, Y, Z in the books, and I was like, it makes sense, but at the same time, like it doesn't. Like it
Yeah.
seems too easy to just say give someone 8 repetitions and this outcome's going to occur. And then sure enough, when I left school and I went and went to Boyles, met you, and then Cressy, and then all these other coaches, Stu McGill, it's just like okay, there's a lot more here that needs to be learned. And one thing I learned when I did Stu's course, it was like when he has his assessments, he has everything set up to a T from the time they get there. It's like I interview at a certain degrees, like based on what the research says, and it's like this is why this guy's the best. It's not just I know back, but how he presents the information, how he sets up the assessment and evaluation. It's all calculated. And that's like, why is Dr. Stu McGill one of the best ever? There's everything is set up in a system, and because he's looked and researched it to find out what's my best way to get the information I'm trying to do to help that
The
individual.
details,
The
the
details.
weird details.
Yeah, and it's not just the coaching because I'm sure that you can teach someone to coach someone to do a certain thing, but getting the right information needed to be able to establish a progressive approach is sometimes lost, and
Mm-hmm.
and that's really key.
You're funny you said that about hypertrophy. And I agree. I still think Tom DeLorme and Watkins are right. Progressive resistance exercise, that 15 to 30 reps, generally, 3 sets of 8. Let's just say
Yeah,
the magic hypertrophy program, 3 sets of 10, 12, whatever it is. And yet, the best progress I ever made on my body, I never did more in triples.
yeah,
Well, how is that? You can't be growing. I put on 40 pounds in 4 months under Dick Notmeyer's guidance, doing snatches and clean and jerks, and that was it. Singles, doubles, triples, and I just got massive. Well, that doesn't fit the research. Yeah, but you know what? When you're throwing weight over your head for an hour and a half, 2 hours, and then switching exercises and then doing that again, there's gonna be some muscle building going on.
well, and to add to that too is I have clients when we talk about like multi-joint exercises are the best for hypertrophy and this and that. I was like, okay, well, what if I have a client that has 35% lung function and I give them 12 repetitions? It's their muscles are not going to fatigue before their lungs and heart have elevated to a point where they need to stop. So isolation, leg extension, leg curls, it goes to like it depends. I need them to build muscle, and unfortunately, sometimes the lungs don't have the capacity to do it, or the heart or a certain organ is just not working at optimal levels. So maybe 5 reps is better at a weight because their lungs don't go out, they still get a good workout in, and you're still building.
And you're doing leg extensions, not, clean and jerks.
Right.
Because that's so.
Well, the multi-joint exercises are great, and we do them, but it's not. It's like it's not the end all be all. And sometimes they come in. It's just like, it's just you can just tell right off the bat because we'll do some metrics before oxygen saturation,
Yeah.
do some stuff to see, and it's just like the hand grip when people do it before, and if they measure low, they're not going to work out hard. Same thing is sometimes you just need them in there. Let's do something. If it's leg extensions, great. If it's deadlifts. But it's like multi-joint is not necessarily always going to be the prize choice in certain cases.
I tell my listeners all the time that the most important thing you can give me is feedback. And I always talk about this feedback loop with coaching. And it is constantly changing. And that's why I think being an American football coach was so good for me as a strength coach, because this is a hard thing to explain to people, but when you have 11 athletes, and there are 11 athletes, and you have the 7 officials, and you have the sidelines, and you have the fans in the stands, and you have, grass, snow, water, mud, and then constantly the game just constantly changes, and I got 25 seconds to get a play in, and boom, 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 boom. What that taught me was that as a coach, we live in this feedback loop.
Yeah.
And if I ever come to you with a program that's built of marble, I'm too stupid to be a coach anymore, because it's got to be malleable. It's got things change. And with your clients, literally things can change day to day, week to week. When I work with Major League Baseball teams, but I'm not going to tell you who because I can't remember their names. But one of the things interesting, their easy strength program, they'll tell me very often, I'll say, so you train 3 to 5 times a week? Yeah, that's true. Yeah. And they'll go, yeah, absolutely. And then they'll stop and go, except sometimes a week will take about 3 weeks.
Yeah.
Wait, I'm no math whiz, but 3 weeks is 3 weeks and 1 week is 1 week. But if you're on the road, like we talked earlier today, your plane flight, sun, you got travels, you got bad hotels, you got bad food, you got all kinds of things, and you got someone who's just sore from playing or had a hard collision or a slide. So that Monday, Wednesday, Friday becomes Monday, Saturday, next Tuesday, there's your week.
Right. And sometimes we like to be sore, but the player doesn't necessarily like to be sore. Like, just because we like things doesn't mean they like things. So we're going into their world, and even then, like, thinking that some athletes have multiple coaches. You have a baseball coach, you could have, a hitting coach, you could have, and then I worked with an athlete that had a running coach, and I would get him after he's already done an hour of cardio right after. So it's like, yes, I would love to change how that was programmed, but they says this is when you're going to work with him, and that's what you're going to get,
And that's it.
And so I had to work around that, where we'd probably get increased gains if he wasn't running right before we went into heavy lifting. So we had to modify, and it worked.
Well, it's what I talk about when I'm talking about coaching swimmers and track and field athletes. Lift, throw, lift, jump, lift, swim. Okay. There's your 2 things. But when you're working with an American football team, baseball team, like you just said, there's hitting, there's base stealing, there's technique, there's strategies, there's tactics, there's. And we have to constantly step back and remind ourselves that. And that's kind of why I think the idea behind easy strength is get in there and get as strong as you possibly can. As easy as you can do it in the least amount of time.
Right.
Well, and the hand goes up. Well, what about this quality? does a swimmer need hypertrophy? Does a swimmer need to look really good? Well, no. I mean, there's a swimmer type,
Right.
but no one. I know that the sprinters like to do a little bodybuilding competition after, but they're a different cat anyway. But for most of us, in most of us, it's lift. Well, many of our listeners lift life,
Yeah.
and you don't need to beat yourself to death to do that.
Yeah, and you have to understand it's very relative. Like you can't take a program from a football player and take the concepts that they're saying. You can, in general, you take it and then you modify it, but you don't. It's not going to be the same specific. It's very relative to the individual, their sport, their environment too. Because once you get to know these people, there's a lot of things going on, and if you want to be with them for a while, then you also have to, as a coach, be willing to give up a little bit in a sense, knowing that it'd be probably better with me working on these fundamentals and mastery than just, if you think someone else in a sense, if you didn't want to give up a time slot, or if I said, no, the only way I'm going to work with him is if he does running after. They're like, all right, thank you. We'll find someone else. Like, you were highly recommended, but this is what's happening. This is what's worked for him. And we want you to be a part of the team, but, and once again, there's a line at which you will go, but I was able to do it, using easy strength and stuff like that. It helped him win a World Series and get a 5-year contract. So,
yeah.
I mean,